Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode in our Extreme Desert Challenge, in which we will hopefully take a few more small steps towards the grand finale. Now, before we jump in today, let me quickly address the recent announcement of the Rimworld 1.3 update, as well as the ideology expansion. As I am recording this video, Rimworld 1.3 is still in beta, so we are sticking to 1.2 for the time being, just to play it absolutely safe. Still, even if 1.3 eventually sees a proper release, we will likely stick to 1.2 for the remainder of the series, simply because I don't see much point in introducing new features and mechanics 1 or 2 episodes before the series ends. The same is true for the ideology expansion, so that will not make an appearance in this series, so the story of the Steakhouse will come to a conclusion with Rimworld 1.2 and the royalty expansion only. Now, speaking of the Steakhouse, in the last episode things were relatively quiet. Yes, we had a small run-in with a sizable group of bears, but apart from that, nothing too challenging. Today we are starting things off with the installation of a trading spot, which is actually a small mod that I have installed. You can find a link to it down below. This will now ensure that trade caravans no longer force us to make a trip halfway across the map, as they will now hopefully wait for us right in front of our storage room. And speaking of traders, that is also the first event of today's episode, as the Steakhouse is visited by an exotic goods trade ship. Shortly after moving our drop pod launchers a bit closer to the storage room as well, Red Hawk can then engage in conversation, and we are actually purchasing the side trainer for the vertical pulse ability. In my opinion, this is one of the more powerful psycasts in the game, as it will cause targets to stumble around and vomit on occasion, which of course renders them rather helpless in combat, and since the ability actually has an area of effect, this can quickly lead to larger groups of enemies being completely disabled. Now, the only one who can learn this ability is of course our colony founder Steak, and who knows, we might also see it in action pretty soon. In the meantime, we are following along with another suggestion made in the comments of the last episode, as we are adding a third layer to our exterior wall and move that inside door 1 tile back. This is done so that our people do not hold the outer door open while they wait for the inner door to open, and can instead move into that spot between the 2 doors. The third layer, of course, also adds a little bit of extra protection against zappers, but that is not really the main intention here. Up next then, another suggestion, and that is a bit of redundancy in our power grid. At the moment, we only have 1 switch and 1 line of power leading to our absolutely essential turret setup, so if that line gets interrupted for some reason, we lose power in our entire kill box. For that reason, we are currently adding a second switch connection, which can then serve as a backup. And while we're on the topic of power, we can now also watch Red Hawk move our batteries over to the hospital, not because I think we desperately need them there, but because we are going to construct ourselves a second high-tech research bench. That way we always have something to do for Carl, who is currently spending most of his time cleaning, and overall research will just progress a little faster. Before that project is finished though, Steak is giving a concert, and considering that we currently still have a high-intensity psychic drone blast the minds of all females in the colony, I think it might be a good idea to let everyone attend. During the concert, the drone then actually comes to an end, and so all is well in the Steakhouse as another evening rolls around. During the night then, we receive another quest, and this is what I have been waiting for quite some time now. This quest, which will have us attack a small pirate camp, allows us to grab 8 more points of honor for Steak, and coincidentally, that is exactly the amount he still needs to finally advance to the rank of Count. So, of course, there is no question that we are going to take this, which is why on the next morning we have everyone prepare for combat. First, Pollyanna creates a masterwork armchair though, which I think is better suited inside of our throne room, because with Steak hopefully about to receive his next royal title, we will have to make a few adjustments to that as well. But let's take things one step at a time and have everyone get combat ready, before we then accept the quest and call in the Imperial shuttle. Now we need to take 6 people on this journey, and those 6 will be Pollyanna, Jake, Carl, Redhawk, Steak and Edmo, with Troy and Alistair staying behind, although hopefully not for long. Following the shuttle on the map, we can see that we are actually covering quite some distance here, but eventually we arrive at the enemy camp, so let's take a closer look. And what we see is actually not terrifying at all. 11 enemies, a small base and 1 single turret. I think we can handle that. Before we attack, we can quickly build some minor fortifications here, just so that everyone has some cover. Following that, we can send out Edmo and his Masterwork assault rifle, with the sole task of luring the enemies towards us. And as soon as we have the pirates' attention, Edmo will quickly retreat using his jetpack, and now we watch the fight unfold. We definitely have the better position and better equipment, but some of our enemies are using sniper rifles, which allows them to keep a bit of distance. So instead, we are focusing on the easy targets, also using our first dose of vertical pulse, although its recipients are quickly mowed down. One enemy then attempts to flank us, but that is what we have Carl and his Thrombohorn for, so that threat is quickly eliminated as well. And a few moments after that, we have already won the fight. Our enemies are fleeing, but of course, let's be thorough, we can always use the shooting experience. During the cleanup process, Carl then unfortunately suffers a small injury, but luckily it's nothing major, only a small bruise from a sniper rifle. So using some enemy medicine, Redhawk can now quickly patch him up, while the rest of our soldiers investigate the campsite. And upon finding nothing noteworthy of value, we can then destroy the enemy battery, which in turn will disable the turret and complete the mission. And there we are, quest completed, and 8 points of honor can now be distributed, and of course, as planned, they are going to Steak. And that means our colony founder is now more or less ready for his count ceremony, at least once we have done a bit more work to our throne room, which still needs to receive a slight boost in impressiveness. Our stay at the enemy campsite here, meanwhile, has now reached its end. We can quickly deconstruct a few things of value to obtain some steel and components and then send our colonists back home. The shuttle filled, like I said, with steel and components, but also with a few meals and weapons. Basically everything that might be of some use for us, either in construction or trade. And so, our heroes arrive back home, and with that we begin the getting ready for the count ceremony part of the episode. First of all though, things are certainly happening fast today. We have a group of 4 Thrumbos pass by, which, I don't think I have to mention that, presents an excellent opportunity for hunting. Now, 4 Thrumbos can be a bit dangerous, so we have to be a little careful here. Nonetheless, in the evening we send out our squad and engage. Luckily for us though, Steak's vertical pulse ability also works on animals, and so we don't have too much trouble at the beginning here. We certainly also benefit from the fact that not the entire group goes aggro at the same time, so we can quickly take out one Thrumbo after another. For the most part, a simple burden ability to slow the animals down is then actually also enough. The combined firepower of 6 colonists is enough to take out even the toughest animal in the game. And so, after a quick shootout, we slaughter and carry 4 corpses back to the base, and shortly after we can watch as another night sets across the desert. During that night, we then receive a request for peace talks from one of the hostile factions on the planet, but we are going to ignore this one. Not only is our relationship so poor that a single peace talk is hardly going to make us allies, but keeping them as our enemies might actually also work in our favor, because at least statistically speaking, it reduces the likelihood of an enemy attack being a mechanoid assault, which at this point in the game is arguably a bit worse than a pirate raid. Now, on the following morning, we are first moving our smithy and then we change research projects, because in order to make steak count, we have to unlock the piano, so let's start working on that immediately. In the throne room, we are also removing our large wooden dining table, and in its place we are constructing something a little bit more luxurious, 2 smaller tables made from jade to be exact. This frees up a bit of space, but keeps the number of chairs the same, not to mention that those 2 tables will be a little bit nicer to look at, and all of that of course helps increase the room's impressiveness. Still, with 146 we are not quite at the required 160, so we have to do a bit more. And at this point, one of the driving factors for room impressiveness is actually going to be space, which is why we are currently preparing for a slight expansion here by putting down some fine marble tiles around our comms console. At the same time, we are also adding a bit more fine carpet in the immediate vicinity around the throne, just so that things don't look too boring. And speaking of boring, all of that is of course a rather time-consuming endeavor, which is why we are quickly skipping ahead to the next morning, during which our flooring project is slowly but steadily nearing its completion. In the early afternoon then, it is time to connect the 2 rooms and to fill the remaining space with fine tiles as well, but before we can finish that, we receive some visitors. Now, we'll take care of those in a moment. For now, we can watch as our room impressiveness has jumped up to 156. Not quite where we need it to be, but we are getting closer. Now, at this point, we can quickly do some trading, but it is unfortunately nothing too exciting. We are just getting rid of a few drugs in exchange for components. After all, you can never have enough of those. Components, that is. For the rest of the evening, we are then focusing a bit on our kill box, where we are following along with another suggestion made in the comments, as we install a few access doors for our autocannon turrets. Just like their smaller counterparts, these turrets will have to be recharged after some time, and these doors should make that process a whole lot safer. Also, a quick change that you might be able to see here on the morning after, Carl has actually moved into Pollyanna's old bedroom, and Carl's former bedroom has been expanded a bit, more on that in due time. Now, as we are just about to move our comms console out of the throne room as well, we are joined by 2 cows, 1 male, 1 female, that have apparently decided that the desert is a good place for them to live in. And at least in the case of the female, we are going to grant that wish. As always, randomly selected from the list of patrons in the naming rights tier and above, she now receives the name Remedy, while her male counterpart is unfortunately not going to be that lucky. As you can see, he is getting slaughtered immediately. Remedy, meanwhile, will produce some valuable milk for us, which we will eventually use to make some lavish meals, because sooner rather than later we are going to have ourselves a guest who likely requires those. In the meantime, Troy experiences a work frenzy and will therefore research even faster, so all in all I think it's safe to say that Randy means well with us today. Let's hope that trend continues for a little while longer. By the way, just because I think you might be interested in this, we are also temporarily stopping our deep drilling efforts now, because thanks to Alistair we have stockpiled over 5,500 units of steel, and apart from placing traps all over the entire map, I honestly have no idea what to do with all of that. In the meantime, work continues in our throne room, where we have now moved a drape and the poker table into a nice little corner here, and are currently constructing 2 comfortable armchairs just for that extra bit of luxury. Later in the evening then, while Troy is butchering a few bears to make kibble, we have a few more rearrangements. The TV has moved a bit, and from that bear skin we are actually constructing another armchair now. Behind it I have already marked off a 3x3 area where we will eventually place our piano. And indeed, it seems like the Steakhouse is doing quite well in today's episode, as in the evening we have a psychic soothe strike the desert, although strike is probably not the correct word here. In any case though, all male members of the colony will be a little bit happier now, and of course that is nothing to complain about. A short while later then, Redhawk receives a recruitment inspiration, but once again I am somewhat skeptical that we are going to use it, but who knows, maybe a prisoner comes along who is just too good to pass up. On the next morning, work on our exterior wall continues. We can also bring in our first batch of milk. And while we're waiting for Troy and Carl to finally unlock the piano, we receive another quest. If we accept, a small tribal outpost nearby will activate, an outpost that will launch raids against us every 25 days. It is only guarded by 4 people, but there are also some mechanoid structures nearby, and there is also some mention here of an unknown threat. Still, the rewards seem quite interesting, so I think we'll check this one out. Perhaps we can pick off the tribespeople without tangling with the mechanoids at all. In the early afternoon then, Steak finishes the first of 2 large structures that I have commissioned, so we are now placing that inside of our throne room as well for a little bit of extra beauty. The sculpture itself, meanwhile, is aptly named Poverty for Edmo, and it shows Edmo enjoying Steak's musical performance from just a while ago. We are also moving around a few more sculptures here just to keep everyone satisfied, and as you can see, that is indeed enough to increase our throne room's impressiveness to over 160. Now we are only waiting on the piano, and while we do that, let's get to work in Steak's and Redhawk's bedroom. As soon as he becomes a count, Steak will want his bedroom to have fine flooring as well, and while we're working on it, we might as well do some slight rearrangements. In the meantime, the royal tribute collector arrives once more, but that is nothing that we need to concern ourselves with. Instead, the bedroom has become a little bit more symmetrical now, as in the evening we start replacing its flooring. Of course, a task like this is not finished in one evening though, and so on the next morning work continues, while off-screen Pollyanna is also briefly constructing our final 2 autocannon turrets. And with his bedroom undergoing a slight remodeling, we might as well send Steak out to do some combat, as we are now in fact going to accept that quest from earlier. Now, reward-wise, I was first intrigued by the anti-grain warhead, but then decided to go with the orbital bombardment targeter instead. Yes, to use that one we actually need line of sight to our targets, but it is pretty powerful as well, and we also obtain some jade and glitter world medicine in the process. As expected, a few seconds later the quest site is then revealed to us, and looking on the world map we can see it is pretty damn close by. Our rewards are also given to us right away, so at this point we could simply ignore the site, and honestly, if what we find seems like a bit too much for us, then we might still do that. The only threat that actively emerges from this site are tribespeople raids in 25-day intervals. Not really the most dangerous challenge, and depending on how things go, one that we might not even experience anyway, as there is a very real chance that in 25 days we are long gone from this planet. Now, with Steak sporting Edmo's Masterwork assault rifle, and with Steak having equipped his jump pack, we are ready to go now, and in addition to those 2, we are only taking Pollyanna for this one. Again, the rewards are already ours, so we don't need to desperately win this by any means necessary. Because there are mechanoids on the map, we are packing some EMP grenades, just to be safe. Other than that though, just a bit of medicine and a few meals to last the trip back and forth. And with that, our caravan is good to go and shortly after leaves the map, and while they are traveling, we receive the good news that the piano has finally been unlocked. So research-wise, we can now continue with our previous project, the marine armor, while back in the Steakhouse, Edmo fires up the smithy to craft ourselves the final musical instrument in the game. He requires a decent amount of wood and steel for that, but most importantly he needs some time, so let's have him go to work as our adventurers arrive at the quest site. And what we can see is the small tribal outpost right next to a currently dormant mech cluster. Those 2 factions will be hostile to each other, by the way, so we could always just activate the mechs and let them deal with the tribespeople, but then we have some active mechs on the map and I would like to avoid that if possible. So instead we are simply moving closer from the west side where we entered, and well, the plan here is actually quite simple. We are just going to start shooting. After all, these are only tribespeople, equipped with melee weapons at that. And so, to no one's surprise, the fight is quickly won, and with that, I think the threat of receiving raids every 25 days has also been removed. That means there is absolutely no need to engage the mechanoids at all here. Instead, let's quickly check out if our enemies have been storing something of value. And of course, things are not quite as easy as they first seemed, as that unknown threat has now materialized in the form of another small tribespeople ambush. Once again though, I am not too worried about this, even though we do have enemies coming in from every direction, but we also have some good cover available to us. And not only that, our enemies are actually also stupid enough to activate the mechanoids, which of course only accelerates their defeat, but perhaps also makes things a little bit more tricky for us. In any case, it doesn't take long until the ambushes are defeated, and I do believe that it is high time for us to get out of here as well, but let's check out that last storage room over here first. And I would say it's a good thing we did, as we find some jade and silver inside. So while we are dodging turret fire left and right, let's grab what we can, and then head for the edge of the map to escape. Reforming our caravan on the world map would not actually be possible at this point because there are still some hostiles present on the map, but using this manual method of escape we can get away, and as you can see on the map right here, the quest site has actually vanished now, so we have no way of going back now, and therefore I would consider this quest more or less completed. Just before nightfall, our heroes then do in fact make it back home. Steaks and Redhawk's bedroom is not quite finished just yet, but then again, our most talented construction workers have all been out fighting. To cut a long story short, in the early afternoon of the next day, the bedroom is then finally finished. It is looking quite nice now, with granite tiles and a lovely white carpet. And in the evening, Edmo also completes his work on the piano. So let's install it, and with that, we are now ready for Steak to finally become a count. This is the highest possible royal rank a regular colonist can obtain in this game, and before another night sets across the desert, let's quickly begin the ceremony. As always, the royal bestower's shuttle arrives immediately, and we can sit back and watch as Steak is granted his last and most prestigious title. And there we are, Steak has advanced to the highest possible rank of Count, and thanks to our extensive preparations, all of his royal titles are already satisfied. Our guests have carried a bit of dirt into the throne room, which only temporarily makes it undignified, but that issue is quickly solved, and so our colonists can head off to bed for the final time today. Now, at this point, Steak fulfills the rank criteria for the Royal Ascent quest, which is how I am currently planning to end this series. To complete that quest, we need to house the Imperial High Stellarch for a grand total of 12 days, during which our colony will be subject to all sorts of dangerous attacks. In order to house the High Stellarch, we also need a proper bedroom for them, so constructing that is going to be one of our main objectives in the next episode. If things go according to plan, that episode might then actually be the second to last in the series, as I don't think I will be able to squeeze 12 days full of raids into one video. So stay tuned for that. For today, I think we have reached a good point to make the cut, but before we go, we once again have some fan art to show off, starting with this one that I already wanted to include in the last episode, some movie poster style artwork from Ryan B, showing our colony founder Steak and his wife Redhawk in the middle of combat. Following that, we have something a little bit more sinister from patron Chrysaor, I'm hoping I pronounced that correctly, who has sent in this rendition of last episode's burning corpse pile. You might remember that scene where we incinerated roughly 50 enemy bodies. Finally then, we have some more artwork from the returning Tony Murchison, another scene from the last episode, but a much happier one. This one showing Redhawk surrounded by puppies and ready to take off in her drop pod, and it honestly made me feel a bit sad about selling those dogs. So thank you to all three of you for your amazing contributions. I am really happy to see that fan art has become a staple in this series, and I can only hope that that trend continues going forward. Now, for today, let's wrap things up right here. As always, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course go ahead and subscribe if you haven't done so already, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.